All right, hi everybody. We're here for the Direwolves of the North panel. I am Matt, also known as JoeMagician. I'm a moderator for the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit, co-host the Maester Monthly, and started a YouTube channel recently.
I'm Vanessa Cole. I am a writer for Watchers on the Wall, and if you guys happen to like Westworld, I write for Westworld Watchers as well.
Yay. Hi, my name is Bex. I write for Watchers on the Wall, and I'm also a drunk of Ice and Fire.
Oh, cool. Hi, I'm Lisa Sponaugle, and I'm an actor in real life, and I'm here because I like wolves and direwolves.
I'm Jason. I'm a staff writer at The Ringer, a great website, and co-host of the Binge Mode podcast.
Great website. I'm Mallory. I also work at The Ringer, co-host Binge Mode with Jason, and I just am suffering from terrible allergies today, so I'm sorry in advance if I'm like sneezing the entire time. Thank you for your forgiveness and acceptance. It's meaningful to me.
That's true. So, obviously the Direwolves are an important part of the story that has started off the books for George. Kind of lost their way in the shows a little bit. But
kind of.
A little.
A little bit.
There's like one left, right?
Two.
Well,
Two.
yeah, but I guess he's taking
Protect Ghost. Protect Ghost.
So, I don't know. Did you guys want to, go down the line and say what your favorite Direwolves were? Mallory, I think yours is...
Well, I'll start, happily. I consider Ghost not only to be a superior character, but a close personal friend and real-life companion. You know, as Dumbledore said to Harry, of course it is happening inside our heads, but why on earth should that mean it isn't real? That's how I feel about Ghost and my bond with him.
It's hard to pick against Ghost. I'll pick Ghost as well, although I have a deep and abiding love for all of the Direwolves. Greywind, a tactical genius, responsible for numerous victories in the South and in the Westlands. Doesn't get his due, was not listened to moments before the Red Wedding when he should have been listened to. So shouts to Greywind, who could have, had he only been listened to, could have stopped the whole thing.
My favorite is Nymeria. Ooh. And I love Nymeria because she was named after a warrior princess, and she's so Arya, so wild, and she is off like conducting her own business. She has her own situation. She has her own army. I'm expecting her to come in again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Ghost. I don't know if you can tell or not if I like Ghost, but I also do like Nymeria because I think that she's gonna bust in and fuck some shit up. Pardon my language, but
we will curse
I like her on the show because she had an opportunity to sort of join in the action stuff, and she's like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. I thought that was like a very intelligent thing for her to do. So maybe people disagree with me, but I'm like, I respect that.
She's like, I'm going to stay off screen so I don't die, basically.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah, Nymeria is great, but I've got to pick Ghost. He's my favorite as well. Couple of reasons. One, because I just love Jon Snow, and of course I'm gonna love his wolf as well. He's a great story. He seems like one of the more fleshed out wolves that kind of has a personality apart from their owner. So I really like that about him. And then I'm just thinking back to my first pet was actually an albino hamster. So I have just like albino things, I guess. So yeah, Ghost is fantastic.
Ghost is here. I'm going to go ahead and agree with the majority. Again, Ghost.
Wow.
Not only is he, I don't know, not only is he basically his own character apart from John, which is very fascinating to me, but I also love the way the albino-ness ties into like the Weirwoods and the symbolism of Bloodraven and all these other characters. Like he's the symbolism of almost the religion of the North in one person.
Yeah.
And like every time he shows up for John, he's like, oh yeah, I'm a Stark, aren't I? Oh yeah, about that. I'm from Winterfell. That's sort of his thing.
Since none of us said Summer, I think we just need a moment here to show some proper respect for Summer.
Silence.
The show did Summer dirty. I will stand by that take for fucking ever. Making Summer's death a B-plot death in that scene, a beautiful scene. Obviously, I cried a lot, but the Summer Brand bond is one of the core central relationships in the show, and I think tells us more about the Warg bond than maybe anything else. So, shouts to Summer.
Shouts to Summer.
Yes.
Yeah, Shaggy.
And I'm going to bring a shout out for the rather unpopular lady, but Poor thing.
Lady,
So
come on.
sad. What a sad death. I felt so bad for Lady.
That was the first of Sansa's many
Tragic.
many bad things that happened to her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was not a particularly good look for Cersei either at that time.
Well, listen.
So.
And in every other
It's
respect,
because she was sober. That's why it happened.
Cersei going from strength to strength, watching a child fall out of a window after sex, to then having a direwolf murdered.
we all have different tastes.
All different takes, yeah.
Well, the direwolves are so important to the Starks and to the story. How do we all feel about the fact that they've been really shunted to the side almost from the beginning?
You mean
On the show.
In the show.
Clearly, the show. I'm talking about the show. Yeah.
I think some of that is just like them not wanting to pay the CGI budget, to be completely honest.
Well, it's not just that. It's actually, I was reading up on this earlier. It's actually really complex for them because they have a guy who trains about 30 wolves in Canada. And it was, he wouldn't allow them to fly to Northern Ireland, so they had to go to Canada to film with the actual wolves. And if he was available, and if they had time, and if they had the budget. And I think they had actually tried to get them involved more in the earlier seasons, just couldn't work it out timing-wise. So they film with them, and then they CGI them larger and then stick it into the show. So, I understand the logistics of it, but it still sucks. We'd all love to have more wolves in the show, obviously, so.
We were having a discussion about this earlier, that they really are so representative of the Stark children and the Stark spirit, that not having them there is a kind of a big loss.
Well, I think you bring up a good point about the difficulties in terms of doing it. We talk about the CGI budget. Obviously, they do dragons. Those cost like $1 million a minute to make. At the same time, a dragon is like a fantasy creature that, if it doesn't, nobody knows what a dragon looks like. Whereas with a wolf, if it doesn't look quite right, you could say, oh, would blow the reality thing. At the same time, this is a show that films in multiple countries with like a gigantic budget. I think it really comes down to, while I agree that it's difficult for them, I think it really comes down to they're like, oh, it's not that important. Is it that important?
It is that important. It's how
it is that important, but I think they think it's not that important.
That's the tragedy of it. The CGI and the locational challenges and how the wolf is feeling about what was in his green room that day, that's all fine.
I think it's hard to shoot in Iceland as well,
Right, it's probably tough to build your own city in Croatia, but they did all of that. The amount of money that goes into the show and the amount of time that goes into the show, I just think those are excuses, and it's fine. The people who are making the show have to make choices. I just think it's a downright tragedy that this is one of the choices that they made, because I think it reflects. And I would just like to clarify for the record that I love Game of Thrones and I love the television show, and being critical of certain choices does not in any way detract from that love. That said, I think moving away from the direwolves and in conjunction with that, away from the warg bond and what that relationship represents, shows a fundamental either lack of understanding or lack of interest in that fantasy element and the importance of that bond and those relationships in the book. Dragons are flashy, right? Dragons are dope. We all love dragons. The direwolf bond with the Starks is a subtler kind of magic and a subtler kind of fantasy execution, and they've opted out, and I think that sucks.
And I completely agree with you. In the books, which I'm rereading, of course, the bond between Jon and Ghost is so, it's such a big deal in the book, and they go so much into it, you can taste the blood when the dog is out hunting or the wolf is out hunting, and it's such a huge part of the plot, and then you go to the show and there's none of that. So that's kind of disappointing.
Especially because that's where the books start, even the idea from it. George was writing his sci-fi book, Avalon, which we'll probably never see. And he just had this idea in his head of a little kid.
You think we won't see the fully realized version of a George idea?
Oh, no, we'll see Avalon on the screen.
We have wild cards, though.
Wild cards.
We have so many wild cards.
Lots of wild cards.
But yeah, that was the scene, and it was Bran fighting the direwolves, and even what you said about Jon, him and Ghost, he turns around because he hears Ghost behind him. That's an integral part of him.
Yeah.
He hears it in his head.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Even the way we're talking about the direwolves, they're characters. They're not dogs. They're not their pets. A lot of these direwolves will be more important.
To latch on to what you said, want to. We know what a wolf looks like. They were never happy with, even with the scene in the last season when Arya wants up to Nymeria. They're not really looking at each other. The wolf is kind of looking here, and she's looking, and it's not never quite lines up. And they never liked the way it actually came out on camera.
I know that they had an uncanny valley problem because the wolves are basically kind of like they enlarged them photographically, and they didn't like the way that looked.
I will say that, and I agree with that as well. They went away from the wolf cam in season 2. Remember when Bran was having those visions, and then you saw from the point of view of Summer running through the woods. I don't understand why that. There's a great solution to your uncanny valley problem. Like, let's see through the eyes of the wolf. Then have them there in the battle. You could have ghosts running around in Castle Black, but they went away from that for whatever reason, and I'm not really sure why. So I think while I agree with that, I still think that there are things that they could have done that they've done in the past that they went away from.
Well, just didn't want to have a show to go on for 20 years.
Well, so then the question, I kind of feel for a lot of people here, do we think that we're not going to see them? Or are they going to come back?
Oh, they're gonna come back.
They have to come back. They can't.
I don't think they can get through season 8 without bringing Ghost back. I mean,
I think
Cogman was on Twitter last season being like, I really tried. Like, they've heard the outcry.
And I think they filmed a scene and had to cut it or something like that. Yeah.
Benioff and West were like,
Our plan
we're working on Confederate.
They instead inserted a joke from Sansa about how the entire North will not sit patiently waiting for Jon like Ghost. Which was
I think that like Nymeria specifically, I think it's going to kind of be like the South, sort of the natural world revolting against the incoming, Night King and all of that. So I think that the Direwolves will kind of be just independently fighting.
Wolves versus spiders big as hounds.
Yeah. I envision
Do we
Nymeria.
think they'll die if they bring them back?
No, they can't because they have to have Direwolves.
Yes, please.
I envision Nymeria
in the panel for tears
coming back with her army and riding in like the cavalry at some point.
Yeah, because I mean, Nymeria and Arya, if we want to, keep comparing the two of them, they both do their own thing independently of other people, and they have their own goals. So I could totally see Nymeria just like, hey, I have like all these direwolves and wolves and stuff. I have my own little army, and like, yeah.
And then at that point, does Arya warg into Nymeria?
Is she going to? Yeah.
But that's the thing. They almost can't do that on the show at that point because they haven't established sufficiently the way those relationships work. And one thing to the show's undying credit is that they actually do try to avoid anything that will feel or read like a Deus Ex Machina. They don't suddenly introduce magic. And obviously, broadly speaking, it wouldn't be introducing magic. We've seen, like Jason was saying, the summer cam, the brand cam. But we have not gotten any of that with Arya and Nymeria, other than the fact that Nymeria didn't eat Arya, and
no suggestions of the wolf dreams from the books,
right?
Yeah,
there's no, think about how many dreams Arya has about a great she-wolf roaming the Riverlands. Even when they're separated by years and leagues, they're still a part of each other. The show has done none of that, and I think my worst fear is that the show specifically structured the Nymeria Arya scene in season 7 with as a closure, as a closing of that loop.
You got it in that area.
That's not you. Calling back to the Arya Ned, that's not me moment. Mm-hmm. I think they might be done with Nymeria. I've never wanted to be wrong so badly. I think it would be awesome to see her again. I think the show has to bring Ghost back. It's a running joke at this point that he's not a part of Jon's storyline.
Probably
I
could
want
use
to
him with
see
Battle
him
of
meet
Bastards.
Dany. I really want to see that scene. Ghost and Dany. That would be cool.
Curl up in bed with them.
At my last panel, I think somebody in the front row said that Sansa or Arya had a line about Ghost last season.
Yeah, Sansa says that the entire North Jon can't expect the whole North to sit around waiting for him patiently like Ghost. Which is like, I think they thought it would be a cute wink wink, and I was like, you just told me to go fuck myself.
It was at you, Mallory. It was only for you.
Any questions from the room? Yeah.
Clemson.
So, do we think, I guess, if the ending is going to be bittersweet, and we expect Ghost to come back, and Jon probably can't die, because
Oh, can he?
Whoa.
What?
John could die.
What?
I think it happens.
This is a different panel, but
And why does the ending have to be bittersweet?
Just in terms of what's been
Right.
speculated and said, so
a lot of problems with this setup already. But continue.
do we think that, what's the chance that Ghost lasts to the end? Like, I think that from a John perspective, if we expect, since he already died once, that is bad. I know, protect Ghost, I'm all for it. But from that aspect, I can see Ghost maybe not making it.
My personal fear is they're all going to end up dead, like books and
Yeah.
show. Because I know a lot of people speculate that all of the dragons are going to die because, this final war is really going to be kind of the end of magic because it's been sort of a destabilizing force. And, if we're really going to get rid of magic, all the magical creatures will probably, like the children of the forest and the dragons and the direwolves are all kind of, tied to that. So that's my personal worry is that we're going to see none of them at the end.
See, now I think that the idea that magic totally disappeared is actually not true. I mean, the children of the forest have been alive this whole time.
The others are the White Walkers have been there. We just haven't seen them. But I
think maybe it will recede. Magic might recede to the levels that it was at the beginning of the story. But I think that there's magic never really disappeared from this world. The black candles were not lit, et cetera, et cetera. But children of the forest were still there under the tree, biding their time. Like the weirwoods were still there. The ravens are still flying. The skin changers were still skin changing. All that stuff was there, just like out of view. So I think that Direwolves will continue. I don't know if Ghost per se will continue. I hope so.
Yeah, but what she's saying is that like a final battle is coming up, and that's the cutoff.
Well, so I think it was Leaf when it was one of the children of the forest, and I think it was in the books that Leaf said something to Bran about how all of their time is going away. Like there's no place for them in the world that men have built. So the children are dying out. The giants are dying out. The direwolves are dying out. Like everything's going away because it's like it's kind of like in Lord of the Rings, where like now it's time for men. And the elves are leaving. And
it's the end of the third age in Westeros, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like the big emphasis with the dragons. The skull's getting smaller and smaller and smaller until everything goes extinct. Hopefully not, but
Yeah, I hope that's not true. I mean, this is probably like painfully naive, but as is most of what I'll say today and always. But I don't know. I almost feel like that would be slightly contrary to one of George's core messages, which is that there is a place for magic in the world, as long as you are willing to open your mind and eyes to try to see it.
I will happily be wrong.
That's one of the emerging themes of this panel.
Well, yes, exactly.
Direwolves in the north, : we hope to be wrong.
We wish they come back, yeah.
Please let's be wrong.
Please don't die.
Please, no magic extinction.
I think we were talking earlier about just how important they are to the Starks. Like, there's that great scene in Dance where Davos has been taken from the jail and he's talking to Waymond Manderley, and he's asking him to, he brings Wex down, and he's like, Wex saw two boys. And he's like, well, how do they know these Stark boys? And in a story that's, especially the books, that is so like built on fake princes and is like fake names and anonymous people going by different identities. The way that Davos knew that Wex was telling the truth was like, I saw two boys and two wolves.
Right.
And I think that is like so crucial to the role of the Starks in this story. I think that's part of why it's so disappointing that we don't see Ghost ever, is because that's how you know that's who that is.
That's right.
That's how you know Jon Snow is important, because he has Ghost.
Like even in the crypts of Winterfell, the lords of Winterfell and all the kings got their statues and their direwolves, but nobody else. It's like all the wives, the second and third sons, they don't get statues. It's just the lord and the direwolf. It's so fundamental to who they are.
Well, just also from like a literary technique, the direwolves as creations are this masterful melding of symbolism and substance, right? It's what they represent, to your point about it's instant legitimacy just to see a direwolf next to this person. That tells you everything you need to know about who they are and what they represent. But then there's something actually core and fundamental and tangible and real behind it. It isn't just a mask. And I don't know, it's always been one of my favorite parts of the books and my favorite parts of the story, and maybe it's just because I'm an animal lover and I like every day I'm waiting for my cat Halo to be like, I got you, let's hunt. But
That's kind of one of the things I loved about the Starks was, that intimate connection with
Yeah.
wolves
Right.
and how important it was to their family history and the current story. And to parallel that, you have the Targaryens with the dragons being so important. And they're really the only two houses with animal sigils that have that direct connection to the animal.
Yeah.
You don't see Baratheons running around with stags following
Which is too bad. Which is all too bad.
All right, I have a quick follow-up to that to pose to the group.
You have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I want to explore the relevance of the Direwolves' pup's mother being dead. To the
Killed by a stag. Yeah.
Yeah.
On the show.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
The symbolism behind that, that's huge. That's such a big deal, and they don't go into that in the show really at all. They really don't get into that at all, but in the books, oh my God, it's like such a big part of it. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, listen, when you first read the book, when you get to that scene, if you're not hooked by then then forget it, just put it down, because that's when you're like, there's something going on. I want to know what it is. I want to understand what it is. And just the way that Ned's men fall silent when Jon is like, well, there's 5, and there's 5 Stark children. And they all kind of realize something strange is going on. That's such a fantastic moment in the book, and a great point.
There's also there are the multiple paths of the symbolic power there, right? There's, on the one hand, and this is something we wanted to talk about, is like what each wolf represents for each of the children, the significance of their names, the significance, at least I want to talk about the significance of their maybe demise and what that represents for each of the children. But then there's also just the sort of circle of life, and on the one hand there's the omen, as you're saying, of the Baratheon stag and the Stark wolf undoing each other, but also what comes from death, life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the messages of the story too, is that death and life are inextricably linked in ways both horrifying and beautiful, and that's just fabulous writing. And I think that is tougher to pull off on the show. You have to sort of count on the audience to kind of be able to pick up on the subtleties of it. But
Joe, you posed a question earlier when we were meeting. How do we think the direwolf got south of the wall? I think that's
yes.
great. So how do we all think it happened?
Direwolves have disappeared from the north for 200 years. Suddenly there's a pregnant direwolf where the Starks are, where Garrett, that's where they find him.
Yeah.
Or Will in the show, I think. They mix them up. How do we think a direwolf got through the wall? It hasn't been seen in the Wolf's Wood, hasn't been seen anywhere in the north. So there's a few possibilities. One of them is, put her in a rowboat and you just go around Eastwatch. That's always a good one. Was she let through by a Night's Watchman through one of the castles? Did she go over the Bridge of Skulls? Did she go down into the chasm? Did she go through the Black Gate? And did somebody actually let her through there? Like, what do you guys think about that?
Blood Raven.
I loved the Blood Raven theory.
Yeah.
I think he
that's
warned
great.
her, and he was at the wall, so he would know if there were places that a wolf.
He would know about the Black Gate,
Yeah. So I don't know that anyone personally let her through. Like, she just found her way because he was in her, or warged in her. Yeah, exactly.
Lord
I think
Commander.
he would have known if there was a way that she could get over the wall or around it somehow. So that's
Or
my
Bran
personal
perhaps did in the future.
As much as I like the Blood Raven theory, I'm just sitting here thinking about it now in this moment, and it would also introduce an element that I don't like. It's one of the reasons I don't like the Bran is the Night King theory.
Yeah.
And it's basically the conflict between choice and destiny in the story, right? And that idea of like a Blood Raven just being like, I'm gonna set all these events in motion because I took a hit from my
You can see him doing his puppet
my
master thing.
railroad paste bong and told me what I had to do here. Like I don't know. I maybe want things to happen slightly more organically than that, but again, that might be slightly naive. What about Cold Hands? Could Cold Hands have?
Cold Hand's going to let him through the Black Gate. Somebody has to say the oath to open up the mouth.
Right. Send the elk over to make friends. A little friendly
Teach it to
sniff,
speak.
bond a little. Right.
But I agree with you. I think the touch of destiny kind of thing, that it just sort of happened on its own, and it wasn't a time-traveling or skin-changing, like, just sort of solve the plot kind of thing. I think that's
Right.
worse as storytelling, but it's also really interesting to think about as the fantasy aspects of the show and the books have really ramped up. We know that it is possible this happened, especially from like the Hodor thing, that Bran can go back in time and skin change something. So I don't know, is it... How do you decide between what you prefer and like what might actually be there?
Bex, how do you think that the wolf got through?
Teleportation.
Nice.
There it is.
There's jetpack.
Yes.
Yeah, so Sophie Turner just got this very direwolf-like looking dog, and I'm kind of reading into it maybe a little too much, but I'm really excited about what maybe it means about Sansa's return to Winterfell and maybe re-engaging with that part of herself that died when Lady died. And
Well, it's the dog she acted with.
That is Lady.
that is the little miniature one.
Oh no,
That was years ago.
Her dog is
a second dog.
She has a second dog, just a little, yeah. I guess I'm just wondering kind of if any of you have any theories about are we going to see Sansa go kind of even deeper into her Winterfell self?
She will.
Is she going to get she's going to go total direwolf, or what these kind of tea leaves of Instagram?
well. She seems to sort of have an affinity for the heart tree. So I don't know if direwolves would be it necessarily, but she does seem to have an affinity for some of the more mystical elements of the North.
Yeah, I love the Sansa's character's evolution from being someone who's really was more enamored with the customs of the South and high lords and ladies. She's so excited to go to King's Landing, and then as we reach the point in the story where we are now, it's just hard Stark. Lady of Winterfell dressing in the Stark colors makes Jon the fucking cool outfit. It's I would love to see that. Where do they get another direwolf? I don't know, man. That would be great if they found.
Maybe she filmed with it. Maybe they're actually going to have direwolf puppies.
That would be incredible. It also gets back to what you were just saying about personal preference and dare to dream versus maybe what would be best for the story. I don't personally want a Sansa Jon rift, but if that's the way the show is going and that's a story choice they make, then, the truth of Jon's parentage and his Targaryen lineage being paired with Sansa leaning in even more to being truly of the North. What did Ned say about Lady's bones when he had them sent up to Winterfell? She is of the North.
Yeah.
That would be a compelling story choice for the show to make as a way to sort of, pit Sansa and Jon against each other. The thing I was going to say earlier is, what if that's how Ghost comes back into the show? It's certainly not an accident. We know it wasn't an accident because the camera lingered for 47 seconds uninterrupted when it happened. When in one of the many Winterfell meetings at the beginning of season 7, when it's Jon, Sansa, you guys can't compare notes before you go out in front of everyone and have this chat.
Right.
When Royce is you can't trust a Targaryen, and then it's him and Jon looking at each other for 5.5 minutes. Ooh, you can't trust a Targaryen. Ooh. So it's reasonable to assume that Jon's men will not be happy. The fact that he's the rightful heir to the Iron Throne does not mean that the North is going to accept him with open arms, not only after he left them against their wishes, but when they find out whose son he is. And Ghost, again, being this representation of truly being of the North, truly being of the Starks. Maybe Ghost comes in and says, no, he's all right still.
He can talk now too. Hey guys, how's it going?
He'll say it with his eyes.
I think that's a really interesting point. Sansa, the actual full Stark, versus Jon, the half Stark, but he has the wolf. Who do they actually follow?
Tormund.
What?
Oh yeah.
And one of the things they could do with the scene where the Northern Lords are doubting Jon is they can echo the Grey Wind jumping on the table scene.
Oh wow.
Oh, tear a couple fingers off.
Right.
Yummy bloody tough. More than Trump.
Lord Umber, when did you get
Oh,
here?
what a guy. Oh, the Lord Umber. Man, nobody has taken losing fingers with the alacrity of Lord Umber. That guy was that was great.
He knew he wasn't going to be on the show.
You got the stuff, Rob. Forget what I just said.
Take any of my limbs. Just give me more minutes.
That's why he's the great Jon.
Yes.
Everything's great.
Yes.
Well, they spent we had that scene with Jon and the dragon last year.
Yeah.
So how cool would it be
Yeah.
to have Jon with Ghost and potentially
Rhaegal.
Oh man.
Rhaegal. You think Ghost can ride Rhaegal?
I fucking love that.
Wait, Did you just put it? Is that Ghost Targaryen a new theory? Oh my goodness.
That would be really incredible.
That would be. I mean, the song that's literally the Song of Ice and Fire incarnate in one image. So is John, obviously, but that would be lovely. All in on this. You should write season 8.
So I don't think anybody.
I have that T-shirt.
Party time all the time.
Yeah.
So nobody here would nominate Ned Stark for Westerosi Mensa anytime soon.
People have
very
different
nice.
kinds of knowledge.
Yeah.
So
He has an emotional knowledge.
He's so loyal.
Yeah.
Having said that, he's not ignorant to the importance of the direwolf to the history of House Stark.
Mhm.
So why do you think he's so quick to want to, just cut those pups' throats so quickly when he first discovers them?
I think he was disturbed, as his men were disturbed also. The fact that these animals that had been thought disappeared were seen yet again. And also, yes, they're the symbol of the Starks, but one would assume that even though they were here centuries ago, the Starks may not have the same relationship with them as the Stark children have in our story. They're frightening creatures, just the way he's like, hey, the kennel masters will not raise these animals. You have to raise these because the dog that you were trying to nurse them off of will tear them apart. The kennel masters will have nothing to do with them.
The PetSmart bill is going to be exorbitant.
Yeah, that's going to be ridiculous. So I think he was scared, and it's not until John is like, well, this actually reminds him, not only is it the sigil of your house, but there's the exact number of your trueborn children here, that he comes around and is like, okay, there's something else going on.
yeah, well, you also mentioned though that I think it came from like a parental perspective as well, because he knew the kids were going to get attached, and so there's the dialogue like, yeah, we'll take care of them.
Yeah. Bran from Jump is like, oh my God.
There's also, the puppies, yay! The defining choice, well, one of the defining choices, but really the defining choice of Ned's life is promise me, Ned, and trying to honor that promise. And that moment, that omen of a stag's antlers and a direwolf, and Robert's wrath, which Ned has spent a decade and a half trying to avoid, I think he's thinking about that too, and what that omen represents.
There's that great moment when John does remind him, and Ned, it takes a second, like it sinks in, and he's thinking, this boy who doesn't even know who he is just reminded me who I am. It's actually an incredible moment. And also just the fact that before Ghost is actually found, John gives up a right to the pups. He's like, no, these are for you. I'm going to step back because I'm not one of your trueborn children. It's really what an emotional moment for Ned, who's spent many of these long years trying to avoid this truth coming out, that John is who he is.
It's, again, just such masterful storytelling, because in one moment it tells you everything you need to know about John as a human being, as a character. Always feeling unworthy, always willing to put himself aside.
How about the color of Ghost? Does it have anything to do with the Targaryen?
Maybe Bloodraven, just because he's an albino too, but most of the time the Targaryens don't have the white and red. They go for black and red.
I think it's just so direct. Ghost, white, snow.
Yeah.
And he was the smallest pup in the litter, I think, and so John saved him, and so I just think it was a choice. Just what's a striking color? White, said George R.
And also
Martin.
just the fact that he was not with the others. He had called some amount of a distance away. He was not with them. Yeah.
I've always felt that the name Ghost, even though it is like overtly described as John saying, "Oh, this is what he looks like," it represents how John feels unseen for his entire life.
Yeah, but I mean, even in our culture, there's sort of a stigma with albinos, in different animals and things. So I think George
seen as
was
strange.
Yeah, it's just different. So I think George was pulling from that too.
Yeah, over here. I mean,
possibly. I mean,
that's what she was just saying.
Yeah. Somebody over here? Yep.
Also, to add to that point, Valyrian heritage has red and purple eyes manifested in their
I wish the show had done more of that, by the way. The purple
Yeah,
eyes.
the gemstone emperors and all that stuff. It would have been good.
They did.
Yeah, they tried.
They
yeah.
tried it.
I think like how they tried to give Harry green eyes once, and they're like, Daniel Radcliffe doesn't like wearing contacts. We're just going to change one of the most important choices of the story because we can't find Visine today. Okay.
It's $100,000 per attempt to make his eye digitally green.
Yeah. Yes.
No, Shaggy Dog.
Jason has a great take about Rickon that I would like you to share with the room.
Rickon is the proto Joffrey of the Starks. I think in the books, the way they set him up is this is the Stark that you don't want to have Winterfell. You know, he's prone to anger, lots of outbursts. Shaggy Dog is trying to bite everybody.
He's like 3 years old.
I know, but I'm saying.
I grow up quickly.
I'm just saying.
Stress.
You know, and Shaggy Dog is like hyper violent, and I think who knows what's been going on at Skagos like all this time. I think that just in the same way that the Direwolves take on the personalities and kind of the essences of their owners, I think the fact that Shaggy Dog is so aggressive speaks to something about Rickon's character that we obviously have not discovered at all yet in the books, and saw nothing of in the show.
I always interpret it as Rickon is so young, but there's so much going on around him he doesn't understand that Shaggy Dog's the personification of this anger from this understanding that he doesn't possess, because he doesn't know why people are leaving, he doesn't know why people are getting hurt and why things are on fire and stuff. So I always thought that was just sort of Rickon's id, if you will.
He's a toddler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a toddler?
Yeah.
They're assholes. Two sons that were just the worst when they were 3 and 4 years old. And I think that's the mentality that the dog has. Is just, I'm going to lash out at everybody because I don't understand what's going on, and I'm really, really mad.
Yeah.
And your dad left, and your mom left, and your oldest brother left, and you got nobody.
So I'm going to bite everybody.
Yeah.
Show of hands, who thinks Shaggy Dog would know how to zig or zag?
Avoid some arrows, yeah.
Tough luck for my guy, TV Rickon, who was legitimately 6'4" when we saw him.
It's going to replace Kevin Love in Cap Celtics.
Also, shout out to whatever is in the water on the set of Game of Thrones. We were talking about this earlier. To everyone but Arya, who sprouted to legitimate NBA height over the course of their...
I have a question for the panel.
Sure.
Do you think that Robb warged into Grey Wind shortly before Grey Wind was killed after Robb was killed?
100%.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear even from the way he was attacking. Grey Wind went after the Freys when he was in there, and I think one of the Freys actually tried to let him go, got shot, and he had to jump into the water or something like that. It's like the loyalty they're showing to Grey Wind is the exact same loyalty they were showing to Robb at the time. And so he said, didn't he say Grey Wind when he died?
Yes.
Yeah. Classic. By the way,
that's recurring
once again, when your direwolf doesn't want you to do something, don't do it.
Oh yeah.
When your direwolf does not want you to go someplace, don't go. What are we doing?
Cat knew.
Thank God, Cat knew one thing. Like listen to your direwolf. Why are we doing this? I saw it. Yeah.
What do you guys think about the Hound of the Riverlands that's traveling with Lady Stoneheart?
Ooh.
Poor Lady Stoneheart. We don't get to see her in TV. Just another discarded element.
I kind of feel like she'll come back. I think they
They're still on this train.
I bet you. I kind of feel like they'll do it.
No.
So much undead. I kind of feel like they'll do it.
Why? They only have 6 episodes.
I know. I'm just feeling like call me a hopeful person, but maybe I'm naive, but I feel like they'd throw us a bone there.
Yeah. I really like Lady Stoneheart as a character. I think that she is sort of the only force in the books, at least, that's fighting back for the Starks, for the Riverlands, even though she's doing it in a really gruesome way, but then she was murdered in a very gruesome way. So she doesn't totally have full humanity, I don't think. But I don't hate Catelyn like a lot of people do, so I'm sort of get some, Catelyn. I mean, come on.
I think that the revenge angle is a great point, especially in the books where so much of what we want to happen is delayed. You know, there's never that final battle. Rob is on his way to reuniting the Alliance when he's killed at the Red White. Like, when you're reading that chapter, as you're coming up to it, you're like, oh man, we're going to put the band back together. Here we go. This is it. We're going. This is the third book. We're going to the end. And then that is dashed aside. Prince Oberyn comes up, and then you're like, oh man, I'm going to get behind this guy. And then he's gone. And Lady Stoneheart really provides that element of somebody is out there fighting for the good guys. Even the Nymeria dreams of like these wolves roaming the Riverlands, killing Lannister men. There's that feeling of, okay, even though our heroes are in a really bad place, there are these elements out there that are still fighting for the good. And I think that's a great point. Yeah.
We talked earlier a little bit about the good guy, what Mother and Lindsay represents, and talked about the kind of obvious first layer symbolism that it's a stag killing it, and that's even noticed by the characters within the story. But there's also kind of a second level of symbolism in that it is the initial event George pictured, which is this finding the Direwolf pups, but it also represents that when you first read the story, you think the story about Ned Stark.
Yeah.
But then by the end of the first, and his friend Robert, by the end of the first story, they are both dead.
Yeah.
Are both dead, and it's actually a story of the children, which is a story of the pups.
Yeah.
And there's actually also a third layer of symbolism, which is that the Direwolf Mother, however it got there, represents that things from beyond the wall that are not supposed to be in the north are now going to be coming south.
That's a great point.
With random wildlings like Osho, small wildling bands, then with the wildling army, and then finally with the others.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I also think we haven't discussed yet the manners in which the direwolves are separated. We're not going to talk about ghosts because that just depresses me. But like the way direwolves are separated from their owners, like Lady was taken from Sansa after she was, having fun with Joffrey, and Cersei was sober, so she was like, kill the direwolf. So Sansa was betrayed very early on by a Lannister, and that's why her direwolf died. And then Robb and Grey Wind were really interconnected, and then they actually became interconnected. And Robb is back there, actually. There he is. Robb is right there.
Back there.
King of the North. King of the North.
Well, actually,
ironically, King of the North.
If you guys were at trivia last night, Robb Wind sang the entire Reigns of Castamere from memory.
Oh, it's tough.
It was magical, but
depressing.
But also, if you think of Arya and Nymeria, Arya kind of breaks free and runs off, and then, well, she throws rocks at Nymeria, but Nymeria, separates from her and runs off and is going all over the place. So I think the direwolves have so many parallels between the children that are sort of semi-responsible for them.
Yeah, I think also to your point, as you were outlining that question, it's in many ways it's a story about parents and children, fathers and sons. That's in addition to John's rough count 874. Well, my father told me lines in season 7.
My father once told me.
We also got a lot about not holding the sins of the father against the son, and ideally it would be a more gender neutral comment, but be that as it may. And then the nature of, what was I going to say? I feel like I had like a profound statement. You sketched out 3 things. Protect ghosts.
Things coming, the wildlings, bands coming, things from beyond the wall coming south.
No. All right. I'll interrupt someone when I think of it again. Shared history. Just how much of the story is about shared history. And your point, I think, is right, which is, it sets up like it's going to be about Ned and Robert and their bond, and then it isn't. But it is still in so many ways. And I think that's one of the things that's so cool about the story is that dance, being able to balance all of these threads, maybe not being able to balance them, and that's why he'll never finish the books. But in theory, being able to balance all of these new forward-looking paths and still having everything link back to this moment and the relationship between, I actually don't think, at least for me, that it's just a total sleight of hand and that it's this isn't actually about Ned and Robert after all. I think, the bond that they had and the love that they each felt for Lyanna and what Lyanna represented to them, and obviously what she also represented to Rhaegar and the choices that he made because of that, proved so definitive that it altered not only the course of all of their lives, but the course of the lives of their children. And so, yeah, just to follow up on your point, I think you're absolutely right. Like, one moment can play in so many different ways and have such significance.
I think that's an interesting point because there's a part of what makes the story so complex is, on the one hand, it's about people rejecting the kind of paths that they were born into. Arya doesn't want to be a lady. She's not going to be the wife of some lord in a tower house somewhere. She wants to do something else. And
Dany wants to break the wheel.
Right. So many of these people want to do the thing that they weren't supposed to do. They don't want to marry the person that they're being forced to marry. And at the same time, it's also about people like Jon discovering who they actually are fundamentally, like their blood. That's the thing that's in their blood. And I think that speaks to the thing you're talking about. Like, there's these levels of agency layered in with these layers of destiny and prophecy that make the story so complex and great. And Direwolves obviously being a huge, not just a great character, but symbolic of that combination of past and present and future and destiny and agency.
Well, yeah, every direwolf and their names are all symbolic of the path of each Stark child, as they were chosen by the Stark children. And you can see it when you look at their names. Shaggy Dog, what you said about Rickon being a toddler. Yeah. Shaggy Dog, what a name chosen by a toddler. Yes, clearly. And Nymeria, Arya is eventually going to become such a big, huge, complicated character. And that's a huge and complicated name.
And even Summer sounds hopeful and good and this is going to be great. And he ends up, he's in a position that he's in. Nothing's ever going to be Summer for him ever again. Yeah. He can't walk. So
also the way he gets the name is really interesting. Bran doesn't name him until he wakes back up from his coma, so it's almost like a divine name that was given to Summer by the old gods.
Yeah, and Lady is sad, just sad. Yeah. This is a young adolescent's dream of what she wants to be, but that's killed right off the bat.
Sansa she annoyed the crap out of me for the first 3 books.
Yeah.
Because I was like, why are you like this? Why are you spineless? Why don't you just stand up for yourself? But she was just trying so hard to be a lady, and then eventually she comes out of that.
That's actually a really interesting point that is a thing that we talk about a lot. Oftentimes, I do this too, like the character that is most annoying in any story is the one that acts how you would act in the story. Like, I'm dead serious. I am not a brave person. Like, I see Sam and I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking shitting my pants too. Like, somebody is going to have to run up to me and be like, yo, send the Raven, send him. And I'm like, And that character is so annoying because you want to be the strong one. You want to be the one who's like, yeah, I'm going to rush in there, pull out my Valyrian sword, I'm going to fight everybody. Sansa's a teenage girl who's in love with the idea of what royalty is, and that's why she's such a great character to me, because she grows into herself in a really naturalistic and authentic way that you can understand.
She's one of the characters that has an arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I was Sansa, I would be so dead.
Over here, back here. Right.
Direwolf that he never killed a wolf or, he never brought home any skins or something for her. And Ned makes sure that doesn't happen.
Yes.
He takes ladies, or he has her skin, her bones, her body taken back to Winterfell.
Right.
So that's hopeful for Sansa. It's not like this part of her died.
It also obviously just foreshadows Ned's choice to sacrifice himself or to interject himself and make the decision that he does to, protect his children. Obviously, played out slightly more complex fashion than he might have been anticipating, but...
Yeah, in the bow all the way in the back.
Okay. I'm wondering what you think. Could Shaggy Dog and Rickon's fate parallel Lady Stoneheart in that she is, oh my God, put it back.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, I think, listen, he's in a wild place, we suspect. Certainly at the end of book 5, the suggestion is that he's on an island populated by wild cannibals that has barely been under the control of the North or anybody ever. Think about the desperation in deciding that that's the safest place to hide a child. And the fact that he is, there's also that vision that they have of like this wild wolf tussling with various creatures. I think that's a really excellent point. Like when we see Rickon again, he's going to be damaged by these things that have happened to him and bonded with his wolf in a way that we cannot predict. Certainly he was an angry child already, and fairly, like, it's absolutely fair. Like, what else could he be? So when we see him again, in the book, my guy learn to run. I think that's a great point. The wolf that wears the man's clothing.
Although just one thing really quickly, a shaggy dog is a story that goes nowhere. Yeah. It's a literary reference, so probably nothing's going to happen with Shaggy in the books. He's probably going to get killed like he does in well, maybe not exactly in the show, but the name implies George does not have a grand arc for him, that it's supposed to sort of leave you hanging.
I wish George had given himself more of those. I don't need to go anywhere with this. This will be fine.
Wanted to say right there in the second row.
Similarly with the names and wolves and children, for Summer, if we're saying that, how does that relate to Bran and his role at the end and bringing an end to the White Walkers and this winter that is coming? I think that kind of symbolism also exists.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
What role does he play in defeating the White Walkers? And even though Summer's gone in the show, that's still the parallel of the name and the character and what roles they represent and how they embody their roles.
Yep.
Absolutely, the dawn of a new type of magic, the dawn of hope.
I would just say that Summer not going with Bran when they're like running down the tunnel is wild. Like he would not just be like, I'm going to fight these whites, get out of here. He'd be like, I'm going to go with you, let's get out of here.
Yep.
Let's go. I'm going to protect you to the last.
Speaking of getting out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys, for coming.
Thank you. Protect Ghost.